I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Are you working?
Am I working? I'm working hard, yes.
Okay. On May 1st, are you going to work?
Well, that's what I'm working on. I'm working on May 1st. The event itself, yes.
Tell me why. Tell me what you hope to accomplish with this.
Absolutely. Well, it all originated with Occupy Los Angeles, who put out a call for a general strike, and it kind of, all of the Occupies across North America are putting out the same call. And the reason is the same reason that Occupy sprang up in the first place. It's to stand up for democracy, which is slowly being eroded, and freedom to even occupy the commons. So freedom to strike. In Canada, the different unions are being ordered back to work.
Yep.
And it just continues and continues, and what we're seeing is this collusion between corporate and corporations and government, and it's now surfacing into so many obvious situations. So
by calling in sick or not going to work on May the 1st, you think that it makes a statement of some kind?
Well, I hope so, because I think this hypothetical 1% that benefit from the way things are, the only thing that will begin to change the system back to one that is true democracy is for the 99% to become visible. Right now, we're divided, right? We're separate. We hide behind our TVs and have our little social lives. But when we come out and we become visible and we stand together, that can't be ignored. So the more we take a stand together, the louder our concerns become and are heard.
Talking with Tosh, organizer at Occupy Vancouver. Patrick Painter is in studio with me now. You were a member of the Occupy movement. You participated last year.
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
And what's happened since?
Well, Occupy Vancouver went through a number of transitions, I suppose you could say. Some directions were taken that I felt were the wrong ones, I suppose. It shrunk the movement. For me, the basic thing that needed to happen was to grow. You must grow. And we had a lot of support at the beginning from ordinary people who, didn't necessarily identify as activists or radicals, a large percentage. And that was eroded over time, and I don't think that's been factored in to the way Occupy Vancouver sees itself, that there were mistakes made, collective mistakes. I'm not pointing any fingers at any individual, but we needed to grow the mass movement, make it a mainstream movement, make it so people in the service industry, teachers, lawyers, politicians, everyone can understand that this is a movement for everyone.
I would have to say that it had an impact on the mainstream. I think it drew attention to the fact that there is a gap between the haves and the have-nots, to put it in very simple terms. I kind of reject the 1%, but I think it's clear that there are groups of people who've done very well over the past decade or so, and there are people who've fallen by the wayside and who've seen their incomes and their ability to make ends meet erode. So I think it served a very valid purpose that way. But I'm also interested because you've taken quite a different turn. You've decided to get working.
Well, when I was with Occupy Vancouver, I was a service industry worker, and I have to say that I was working for a fine food store in South Granville, and it's a pretty tyrannical, sociopathic employer, I have to say. So that was, part of one of the reasons why I was there.
Yeah.
Was that I felt this sort of
felt oppressed.
Exploitation, I would say, on a daily basis, and it's not that necessarily it was the individual employer's fault, although I would say partly so. But, there are systemic problems that make these sorts of actions that employers engage in, not all employers, but some, understandable. They work within a system, and so that's why I was there. But really, a lot of people are looking, people like myself, I think, who are in that position, are looking for a vision, a direction, not necessarily the next day that we're going to be liberated, everybody's going to be happy. But we want a direction, something coherent. And now that was a big thing at the beginning was, the mass media was saying, well, what do you want? What's your coherent vision? And it was understandable that we didn't have one at the very beginning. But time has passed, and it seems like there's very little to latch onto of substance that, all right, what is this 99% versus 1%? What do we mean? Let's get more specific. Let's start defining things. There's a lot of talk of, love, for instance. Let's love each other. Now, I'm all for love, but what is this going to do? Claims that we need to love each other more. What is this going to do on the ground for people who want to feel like they belong to something that is a force for positive, real, lasting change? So there are a lot of gestural sorts of things that I think took over a little too much. There was some infighting at Occupy Vancouver. I mean, nobody can really deny that. And, that was bound to happen, I suppose. But yeah, so now, I'm trying to work for myself independently, which I have to say is much, even though I'm making less, if that's possible, I'm much more satisfied. It is a huge burden that people...
So what are you doing?
I am an environmentally friendly lawn cutter. I only use muscle-powered mowing machines to cut people's lawns, and I work in my community, which is also very satisfying that I get to talk with people who kind of respect me more because I live in a local community. It was very funny when I was working at this cafe, because I was commuting in there, and people would come in, and it was a very kind of transactional relationship for the most part. And I think that's a very familiar experience. You go to Walmart, you go to Superstore, I feel embarrassed, to be perfectly honest, when I go to these places and I have to look the cashier in the eye. It's like, this is a very unsatisfying form of work, and I wanted Occupy to address that, Occupy Vancouver, and I suppose they're trying, and I'm not saying...
Let me come back and ask Tosh about that, but they are calling it May Day. The Occupy people are wanting you to take a day off to protest, to take May 1st off, to call in sick. Tosh Chiodo is organizer at Occupy Vancouver, and Patrick Painter is a former Occupy Vancouver participant. He was on the communications committee for the movement. He's now working as an owner-operator with Blades, enviro-friendly lawn mowing. May 1st, you plan to be cutting grass.
I do indeed.
So you're not taking the day off?
No, I'm not.
You're not calling yourself to say, I'm sick?
I thought about it, but then I figured that would be a little absurd.
So, Tosh...
Yeah. Well, everything that Patrick has said, well, not everything, but almost everything that he said, I don't disagree with. And I think that on October 15th, 2011, when the first Occupy gathering happened down at the Vancouver Art Gallery, clearly a chord had been struck. And even the organizers were pretty shocked and delighted by the 5,000 people who showed up.
Yeah, there was a big turnout.
It was unbelievable, and the energy was just incredible. But the thing is, nobody organized that. All that happened. It was not particularly promoted. All that happened was a date and a place was set. Why did those 5,000 people come out? What brought them out? Where'd they come from? And, Patrick mentioned that the word love keeps surfacing up in the Occupy movement, and it's true. I'm not sure that people who promote love understand it as thoroughly as some of the people at Occupy Wall Street. But one of the things that struck me when this occupation began in North America was that they were standing up for the rights of the people. But the difference was they were not so much just protesting and complaining. They did it in a totally loving, peaceful way, and that's what struck me.
It started that way, but then it seemed, and I'm speaking from somebody who was watching it from a side,
yeah.
It seemed to degenerate into kind of an excuse to camp out, to just take up space. It became a secondary downtown east side, a lot of drug users, people who were already totally disenfranchised, gathered, and it seemed to lose credibility with people who had initially some sympathy for it.
Yeah, it got very difficult for people who were down there as well, who believed in the underlying message of Occupy. But the problem is that if we want to change the system, part of the system is that we disenfranchise people. We don't like to look at the pain and the ugliness of the homeless and the addicted who are in the city.
But I think at the same time people looked at it and said, you're trying to disenfranchise me. You are taking away public space for people who otherwise would have been at the art gallery. You were sort of pointing fingers at people who are out working hard trying to make a living.
No. Maybe some people were pointing fingers. For me, I was pretty consumed by trying to figure out what to do with the homeless and addicted that had moved in.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So, we had our hands full. And you know what? Every Canadian has their hands full right now. And of course, if you're working full-time, you don't have a lot of time to think about the inequities that are happening in the world and in Canada. For us who had the luxury to come out and to occupy, we took advantage of that time, and the dialogue has never stopped trying to address what's going on in Canada in particular, because there's lots of signs of collusion between corporate power and government in our own country. There's definitely eroding democracy, and the Canada we love, that we're proud of, is slowly, systematically being dismantled.
Yeah, I guess it depends where you're sitting. If you're sitting with your family in an air terminal, wanting to get home to go to work, and Air Canada employees are calling in sick or going on an illegal strike,
yeah,
you don't perhaps think of it as a lack of democracy. You're
right.
thinking of that a public service is being denied.
It's an immediate need that you're not able to meet because the system that was supposed to be there is not working.
Tosh, I'm gonna come back with some phone calls. I want to know. People are calling for May Day, a demonstration on May 1st for you calling in sick to protest what, Tosh?
Can I clarify something? Actually, Occupy Vancouver is not promoting people calling in sick. We respect that people are working, and so we've moved our celebrations to later in the day. Our main speaker lineup starts at 4 p.m. and then a march at 6 p.m.
So you're not calling. People in Toronto, I gather, are calling on for a massive call-in sick day.
Yes, they are. And, of course, down in south of the border, they're calling for a general strike. But in Vancouver, we are in solidarity with the unions. And, of course, a general strike is a pretty serious thing to call for, so we're not going that far.
You don't want to call on something and have nobody come.
Well, we don't want to call on something and have people fined for responding. Right, the unions and union members can be fined for not showing up to work.
Okay, let me get some calls. We just have a few minutes before the news, but I'm curious to hear how people are responding to this. Mike, good morning.
Good morning. I'm not sure where to begin, Bill. I'm about 2 minutes in. I thought maybe this was a FCTV segment. I can't take these people seriously. This woman's talking about the Canada we once knew. I think she needs a history lesson. This is the Canada that people have been coming to and maybe even dying to get to for hundreds of years. It's the land of opportunity. What do these people expect to prove by lobbying government to give more handouts, people not to work, people to, rebel against corporations? It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't take them seriously.
Tosh, the caller makes a good point. There are about 250,000 people a year who are knocking on the door to come to live in this country.
Absolutely, and relative to other countries, we live in an incredibly democratic and free country. However, unless we close our eyes, we are also now leading the entire planet in environmental destruction with the tar sands, and the amount of resistance to that from the landowners that are affected, including many First Nations groups. There's never been such an incredible unity that's emerged. Because, we want to take lobbying out of government because of the influence it has on policy, and yet the biggest lobby for the oil industry is sitting in our Prime Minister's chair. So what do we do about that?
Well, aren't you lobbying?
Am I lobbying?
Yeah.
Well, I don't speak with politicians directly, so...
No, but isn't the whole Occupy movement a huge lobby?
It's a lobby for, yes, it is a lobby. It's a lobby for the world that we know is possible.
Hardy, good morning.
Good morning. Good talking to you. Enjoying your show as per always. I want to touch on your guest's latest comments with, I think a lot, like specifically Harper and the oil and the Enbridge pipeline. A lot of people don't realize that there really should be a separation between government and corporations' influence, and the corporations have seeped into government power decision-making, you know, a lot more in the past couple of decades than it was previously. And I think the biggest problem with that is government should be, looking out for the interests of all people. And corporations, I mean, there's a really good professor at UBC, I can't recall his name right now, but he's done a couple of books on how corporations work.
Yes.
And corporations work only for themselves and for profit. They don't have any other mandate. And they come up with green strategies and stuff because it's going to help their corporate bottom line, but they really have no belief system in that. And there's nothing right or wrong with that, per se. But the biggest problem is when governments don't act in all the public's interest, and they cater to, one side over the other. And of course, there's always, in all decisions, there's winners or losers. Business, we live in a capitalist world, business,
You're starting to ramble, and I'm running flat out of time. We've got a break for the news.